This will be tutorial 2 of our 2019 Python tutorials, and we are going to start immediately from where we stopped. So I'm going to go ahead to open Python IDE, and that is PyCharm, and I'm sure you've already set up PyCharm in your system. So remember to subscribe if you've not subscribed, and also try to make sure you follow this tutorial step by step, because by March we are going to conclude this tutorial and move into another programming language. So this is where we stopped in tutorial 1. In case you forgot what we did, I'm going to actually close this project and then open it again so that you know or you remember the procedure. So at this point, I'm going to just create a new project and I'm going to call it tutorial 2. So make sure you follow along, and if you have challenges, just leave it in the comment box below and I'll answer immediately before the next tutorial. This tutorial, if you notice, is released maybe the next day after the first tutorial was released. The reason is because the first tutorial is fairly easy to follow, and so I have to release this. The reason is also that we have 2 lessons per week, so sometimes it may be a lesson released after 2 days, maybe after 4 days, maybe the next day, but the fact remains that it has to be 2 lessons per week. So we have tutorial 2 here, but I now have to right click on it and say new and choose Python file, and I'm going to call this Python file the same tut2, or let me just use the full name, tutorial 2, or let's call it basic syntax, because that is the title of this tutorial, basic syntax of the language. Alright, so at this point we have it open, so let me just change my screen to presentation mode so that the font will be a little bigger. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead to paste what we are going to cover for today. So I'm starting with comments in Python, because you see that I'm putting the course outline or the schedule for today inside the IDE. So let's start with comments in Python. Comments in Python can be single line or multi-line comments in Python. For single line comment, it starts with the hash key. So if you want to include something you don't want the compiler to execute, for instance, your name, program by so you can include it in the using a comment symbol. So if you use the hash key, every other thing specified after the hash key is ignored by the compiler. So that is how comments work. Now, if you want to use multi-line comment, you can use the apostrophe sign 3 times. So in this way, anything you include inside becomes a comment. So this is multi-line comments, and these are single line comments, right? Good. So whatever is in between the triple apostrophe or single quotes is ignored by the compiler. So let's proceed to the next point, Python program syntax. So Python program syntax is simple. It follows the indentation method. What does indentation method mean? It means that blocks of codes are indented. So if you have, like in other programming languages, you may have something like a curly brace, open and close curly brace, and you have some blocks of code in between. In Python, it doesn't really work that way. In Python, you use indentation to indicate a block of code. So if you have some code, for instance, let me just give an example. So if you have a something else written in between here, so you can see that this is indented and placed in the next line. So it means that this block of code under this statement normally is executed together and they belong to this line, right? So maybe when we use it, it becomes a little clearer. So that is how Python works. But generally, each of the statements start from the first column of the program block. Python identifiers are simply the same as variables. right? So variable names start with lowercase, so you can say something like a is equal to 5, a is equal to 5. So of course you can start with uppercase, but it's recommended that you use variable names with lowercase. Variable names cannot be numbers, and they cannot contain special symbols. When we use it, it becomes also clearer. And we've discussed lines and indentation, multi-line statements. Now, if you are writing a statement, for instance, the statement is so long and you want to continue the statement in the next line, you can write it into the next line. For instance, you want to write a long formula for a is equal to plus 8. Let's say, let me write something else. 34 times 6, and then you want to continue like writing minus 20, and then you want to move into a second line. You can use the hash key, the backslash, yeah, to move into a new line. So with this, you can now continue writing maybe 5 minus 8 and so on. So if you write in this way, it's the same as putting the 8 in this point. So if you use a backslash, the compiler understands that you want to have the line continued in the second line. So that is what you need to know. Now let's get to the fun part, getting the user input. How do you get an input from the user? You get an input from the user using the impute statement. So how does it work? You simply say impute, and then you put a prompt, please enter your name. So this impute, enter your name, returns whatever the user enters. So whatever the user enters, you need to assign it to a variable. So let's say the user enters his name. Now you need to assign whatever the user enters into a variable. So if you say something like this, name is equal to please enter your name, it means that when the user enters something on the keyboard, is assigned into this variable name. We are going to use it in your first program. And now how do you print out something to the output? You use the print statement, print something to the output. So let's run to see what happens, and now we expect it to print out something to the output. So I'm going to click on this run button here, or maybe let me just get it clear. I'm going to right click and just click on run. Yeah, say stop and rerun, and that is fine. So what is happening here is the first line executes and says please enter your name. So if I enter my name, this name entered by the user is assigned to this variable name. So this variable name will contain what the user enters. So if I press enter on the keyboard, it now runs the next line that says print something to the output. So Python is an interpreted language, meaning that it executes line by line, right? So if it executes this, it executes the next one and continues like that. Let's now put everything together to write a simple program. Let's write a simple program that asks the user for his name, and then the user enters his name, and then he greets the program greets the user, welcome, and then his name. So let's do it. So let's use what we've learned. I want to say program to get user's name and display a greeting, right? So the first thing is to get the input from the user. So let me say name is equal to input. So I'm going to put in double quotes whatever I want to be displayed to the output. This is called prompt. So the message that tells the user what he's expected to do is called a prompt. So I'll say please enter your name, right? And then I'm going to then greet the user by by printing out a greeting, welcome. Now I'm going to teach you something else, and that is joining two strings together. So the name now contains whatever the user enters, and I'm going to attach it to this welcome. To do that, I'll use a plus sign. So I'm going to say plus, and I'm going to say name. So when the user enters the name, it displays welcome plus the user's name, and I would like to say goodbye. So I hope you're following. I'm going to run it by right clicking and clicking on run, and then it says please enter your name. It says welcome Kindson and goodbye. So that is basically how Python works. So take some time to make sure you understand what we've discussed in today's lesson, and in the next lesson we continue with Python variables and data types. I'd like to thank you for viewing. Please subscribe if you've not subscribed, and please leave a comment if you find anything challenging, because I really want this to be very simple for everyone to follow. We'll gradually ease in from the simple part, and we start taking something a little more challenging.